This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 30th of March 2020 and I am 2J.
I'm Tuam.
And I am GK, and in case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Star, Corona cases hit 42 as curfew bites. In the Daily Nation, measures to save Kenya.
Yes.
And in the Standard, man of the moment.
Fantastic.
Shall we begin with the Star?
Yeah, but before we begin, welcome back, both of you from isolation.
It was important.
It was important.
Yes, it was.
We're supporting the government.
Social distancing.
Okay.
So what is the Star telling us?
The Star is telling us that corona cases have hit 42 as curfew bites.
Yeah.
Now, yesterday there was a presser by CS of Health, Mutahi Karwe, and he said 42 cases have been reported. And they have taken some measures to ensure that this disease should not spread as it is spreading right now. So he spoke about a partnership between private sector and government, and they have come together and have earmarked schools that will hold about 1,000 beds, ICU beds.
Yeah.
But also of importance is they have recognized that they would need to manufacture masks and gloves and equipment that is probably not accessible right now in the world because of a global shortage.
But let me ask, is designating high schools as, quarantine areas or as hospitals a smart idea? I don't know if that's going to be sufficient.
Is it enough? Especially because what is key here is the ventilators, those things that will help support
Exactly.
these patients.
Look, it's the Ministry of Health, and what they have realized is this. The largest infrastructure government right now has across the country is public schools. If you're going to have a bed, that's a unit that you need right now, singularly.
I wouldn't agree that a bed is useful.
Just wait, and staff as well. I am sure they know they would need ventilators, they would need all manner of machines to keep people alive. Then as well, this is where private sector comes in. See, by the time they're saying they have discussed with private sector to have 1,000 beds, I am sure other things are also in discussion.
Okay, but I think we need to take into consideration that the private sector is alarmingly quiet right now in this entire situation, right? Let's take New York, for example. They said that they need 40,000 ventilators for the way that they're seeing the case right now. We know that New York in the US is one of the epicenters of the virus. The government said that they can only give them 400 ventilators. That's a tenth of what they need. So the governor essentially said, government, keep your ventilators. I'd rather go talk to the private sector so that they can help me. And that's why you have big companies like GM and Tesla, what's the guy's name? Elon Musk, saying that they were going to dedicate their own factories to ensure that these 40,000 ventilators were met. Is Kenya capable of doing the same?
Absolutely. Okay, I know already that East African Breweries, for instance, is supporting the manufacturing of sanitizers. So we've seen those small steps being taken. But I think, you're right, private sector has to step up in a very big way to augment what government is doing.
That's correct.
Let's move on to the Daily Nation.
Yes.
Again, measures to save Kenya.
Yeah, so in the Daily Nation, they're talking here again about how we've now reached 42 total cases. But they talk about a confidential report that they have that warns that the cases in the country could reach an exponential level. And they say that in the next week, unless we take a lot of urgent and necessary interventions, including mass testing and following contacts, that this is going to reach a very high amount of cases that we won't be able to take care of. And I think I completely agree with that. Right now we have Mombasa, Kilifi, Kwale, and Nairobi being the epicenters in Nairobi. And I think that if we don't have a partial or full lockdown in some of those places, it's going to spread to a position where we're not going to be able to handle it. And I think that
Prof was he released damaging ignorance yesterday, and he said by April the number of infections could rise to 160,000 cases. This is based on an exponential modeling thing. Look, yes, it is very possible that these numbers will rise, but I also think that should we all maintain this social distance thing, we could very well minimize the numbers from going to 160,000.
Yeah, to those scary numbers. Yeah, that's very true.
Right. So then in the Standard, we had Man of the Moment. And here they're talking about the CS of Health, Mutahi Kagwe, or otherwise known as Mtu wa Corona. He's been giving you your daily updates on what is happening with the pandemic. And basically the article sort of highlights his political past and his past successes in other positions that he has held. Among them sort of being like how he was a senator of Nyeri, but how he was a shining star, Maido Ma Nyeri, the eyes of Nyeri, to becoming Maidori Ma Nyeri, which is the tears of Nyeri, and how he went on to lose his gubernatorial bid in 2017, but also how he has had really good success in being a cabinet secretary before, when he was the Minister of Information and Communication, where he birthed sort of M-Pesa, or at least, you know, how money systems are run in this country, and also spearheading the construction of the East African Marine System that pioneered fiber optic projects for East Africa. So we can see that he is a man who does well under intense pressure. We've been seeing that. He essentially is, you know, he was initiated under baptism by fire. He was told, you know, this is what's happening, there's a pandemic, deal with it. And he was only a month into his job. So he's a shining star for now. However, I think, you know, with the updates, I think Kenyans want to know how alarmed should we be, and I think that's the reality. It's enough to know that we have low numbers, but we have low numbers because we're also not testing
frequently enough.
That's very true.
You see, there is when Mutahi Kagwe appears every single day to tell us about Corona, what does that inspire to you?
It does inspire confidence.
A lot of confidence. You see, President Uhuru Kenyatta is playing an infinite game. He's playing a long game here. And he's hiding Mutahi Kagwe behind Matiang'i. And the real card on the table come 2022 will be Mutahi Kagwe. In fact, I want to hypothesize that the new Gamer King that is probably giving William Ruto a little bit of a headache is Mutahi Kagwe.
He could not capture Harry, but somehow will run.
Well, Uhuru Kenyatta could not capture the Tundu South in 2000 and is it 1997 and 2000, one of those election years. Look, at some point you will have to fail. At some it's a given. But you know what? You will be built if the system is pro you. It will build you.
The way I see it right now, unless this coronavirus, you know, stays with us for another 2 years until 2022, Mutahi Kagwe will be forgotten very quickly. He will be man of the moment right now, but something will happen that will make the minds of Kenyans forget that this virus ever existed. So,
well, guys, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to break down the headlines. We ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy? Well, what do we think of these 3 headlines?
I would go for the Daily Nation, measures to save Kenya.
Right, there you go.
I would go with the Standard, man of the moment. For I mean, we know this Corona. Why are we being told every time? Let's look at something else.
All right, GK.
I will tie break. I like the Daily Nation, measures to save Kenya. It's informative.
I expected both of you to go the same way.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so toss them. Onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a 3-part criteria that we use. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy? Shall we begin with?
The Star.
The Star? Okay.
Yes, and the Star is Ozone. And there he has a drawing of the Kenya Police. And inside there is the stairs that leads to the head of Kenya Police. And inside the stairs, inside the room in the head is a brain. Out there, a corpse clobbering someone. And the caption there is, what should remain inside during a curfew? And I think this is fantastic. You see, what he's telling us is that when the cops first effected the curfew, they went clobbering people, depicting a situation that they were a brainless bunch. And that's what Ozone is alluding to, that next time they go to the streets, they should actually take their brains with them.
I don't think I agree with that interpretation. I don't think I understand the cartoon at all.
So
I think that if they went to the streets and we're assuming that they're brainless, it means that they didn't have a brain to begin with, right?
So what is still remaining?
So what is still remaining?
Yeah. It's one of those. It was trying to be too clever.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, can we toss the Star?
Please toss it. Toss that Star.
So, in the Standard, we have Gado. And Gado has drawn a big military boot. And under it, you can see the coronavirus being stepped on. And you can see other army people, police people sort of patrolling. I mean, and it's the use of what we've been seeing, the security forces for, curfew, enforcing curfew. Some people have said it's really unfair. Is this the way to go about it? Does, the curfew have to be this draconian?
Yeah, I think right now, I don't know if Kenyans realize this, but we have the good end of the stick right now in terms of what the government has enforced. I think extremes that we could see if people do not comply is things of like martial law, where you have the police patrolling constantly, you're not allowed to leave your house. Right now, Kenya or Africa in general does have it quite good. Places like the UK, I saw pictures where the police would show up if you left your house. Right now, I think we do have, the government is allowing people to go on with their business, allowing them to make money. So just comply.
Just comply. In Rwanda, they're getting shorter. Wow. If you show up, if you get...
Hopefully with rubber bullets?
No. It's copper.
Kagame style.
Okay, what do we have in the Daily Nation? We have... IGA. IGA has drawn for us some policemen coming out of a truck. And the truck is labeled government donation. And then on the other side, you can see a crane that has the coronavirus on it. And it says donation. Now, I'm assuming it's the donation from Jack Ma, Chinese billionaire who gave us about 25,000 testing kits. So government's gift to this whole thing has been
policemen,
the rungus that you've been seeing on the streets. My question is, was there like a tender to put these things up? Like, how come everyone has this uniform rungu? I mean, anyway. Funny.
I mean, we always talk about Iga and his comic strip cartoons.
Guys, do you think this Jack Ma's donation to Africa should have been tested?
I think so on one end, we've seen on the continent a lot of the Chinese masks that were coming, some of them have been defective, are not doing what they were supposed to have been doing. So I get it on that point, but I think we take what we can get.
Be cautious. But I think what's also great, I think we had discussed this earlier in the day, a lot of private industry that is coming together to kind of help with the deficits that we're seeing. People coming together to help make masks. I know that Gearbox, for example, have been in talks to help develop some ventilators. So we do kind of give the private sector a bit of credit for what they're helping to do.
Absolutely. And good on Jack Ma.
So who should we give our winning cartoon? It's between Gado or Iga?
None?
Yes. We can't give it to Gado with the boots?
None.
No. None. Okay. None. So on a day, no winning cartoon.
Overruled by the
What is our final thought?
And now our final thought. Today it is inspired by the history of lockdowns and quarantines that have defined history. And today we will tackle the Spanish flu of 1918.
Yes. So this week we want to take a look, just like 2M said, at the life lessons from the history of lockdowns. So this ranges from some of the mild cases of lockdowns, which is maybe like a stay-at-home order, which is what I would say we have right now, to the more extremes like martial law or full lockdown quarantines. So I think that right now Kenya has a really great opportunity to decide which direction it wants to go in. And I think that if we use history to paint a picture of where we are, we can also see where we could be if we take this very seriously. So today we start with the Spanish flu of 1918 as an example of why social distancing methods are so effective. And that the way to effective social distancing, the key thing is timing. So lockdowns have been very successful and they've been used against pandemics, terror attacks, and other kinds of disasters. So the idea of placing a possibly sick person in quarantine actually goes back to the Bible. In the book of Leviticus, chapter 13, verse 54, a priest was ordered to wash a contaminated person and isolate them for 7 days. And this was probably in reference to somebody who had leprosy. But if we look to the origin of the word quarantine, it dates back to the bubonic plague in Venice, Italy in 1317. And this was also known as the Black Death, and it killed almost 1/3 of Europe's entire population. That was about 25 million people. So Venice at that time was a major trading port, and it got very nervous as it saw this bubonic plague begin to grow. So other ports in Europe, like in Croatia, for example, had instituted what they called a Trentine, which was a 30-day restriction where newcomers on ships had to stay on board to see if any symptoms would arise. But Venice, which was a large trading port at the time, so that this wouldn't be enough. And that if a ship was suspected of harboring the plague, it had to wait 40 days before any passengers or any goods could come onto the mainland. So this 40-day waiting period was known as a quarantinario, which came from the Italian quarantina giorni, which is 40 days.
Okay.
So what you see is that the history and origin of quarantines is more about than just keeping sufferers at a distance. It's more about than just keeping the social distancing.
Yeah.
But the first organized history of quarantines in medieval Europe reflect an awareness of the silent and unseen presence of a disease in a person who, at first glance may just appear to look good.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the social distancing is so important.
Yeah.
For all I know, 2M could be harboring the disease right now, but because he looks healthy, I may not know that he has it.
Yeah.
Vice versa. Interesting thing here. According to Stanford University journals reading, that the Spanish flu could actually have come from China. Now, what are the odds? And the reason it was also called Spanish flu is because it had such a huge affliction and high mortality rate in Spain.
Yeah.
And it's thought about in May 1918, 8 million people were killed by this Spanish flu. Now, it is also thought that and it's actually part of history, that 500 people globally were infected with Spanish flu.
500,000.
500 million people were infected. That was a third of the world's population then. Now, 50 million people died from this. It's about 10% mortality rate. About 675,000 Americans at that time, at the beginning of the stages, were actually infected with this virus. Now, the first wave to hit America hit in about early 1918, but few noticed this epidemic, and this was because there was a war going on. Now, a second wave hit America in a place called Boston in September 1918, and this one was crazy because about 1 in 4 Americans were infected. In fact, the then president called Woodrow Wilson caught the flu himself. Now, I want to read some figures as to how this impacted the world. Now, the average lifespan in the United States depressed by just about 10 years.
Wow.
10 years of a full country, right? Now, mortality rate was very high in people between the ages of about 20 to 40. Now, those are people who are expected to fight this disease.
Yeah.
Now, and also, people above the age of 65 were also highly affected. Now, you compare this to Corona. Corona is thought to take out people above the age of 65.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why fellows in Italy are dying. But this tells you and shows you how much damage a virus can do. I don't think we would get to the numbers it did in 1918, in Corona. But yes,
we have to take this seriously.
It is this history for me.
So I looked at how some US cities tried to halt the Spanish flu in 1918.
Yeah.
So there are 2 cities, a tale of 2 cities, Philadelphia and St. Louis.
Yeah.
So in Philadelphia, 1918, they threw a parade.
Yeah.
So despite warnings that there was, some kind of virus going around, influenza, they still decided to hold this parade.
Yeah.
And this parade brought together 200,000 people who were crammed together to watch a procession. Now, this procession was to support the war effort at the time. So a lot of people wanted to come out to support the military and show their support for their country. Less than 3 days later, every bed in Philadelphia's 31 hospitals was filled with sick and dying patients from the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
By the end of that week, 4,500 people had died.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so by the time Philadelphia politicians were saying, gosh, we need to close the city down and have a lockdown, it really was too late.
Right.
And then a different tale or a different story played out in St. Louis.
At the same time.
At the same time.
Yeah.
Just 900 miles away.
Yeah.
And within 2 days of detecting the first of its cases, civilians of the city schools were closed. They weren't allowed to move around as much. Playgrounds were closed, churches, banks, libraries, courtrooms, everything.
Yeah.
And work shifts were staggered.
Yeah.
And those street cars that they used to move around the city were also limited.
Yeah.
And public gatherings of more than 20 were, put a stop to. They were banned.
Yeah.
And these are the extreme measures that we now know as social distancing.
Yeah.
Yes.
However, social distancing in St. Louis is what saved them from having per capita less deaths than flu-related deaths than their counterparts in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And so this concept of flattening the curve that we keep hearing around is simply that once a virus cannot be contained, the best that you can do is to slow its spread.
Yeah.
Correct.
That is why social distancing is
so
that
critical.
important. Yeah. And the key to social distancing is actually timing. And they say that the benefits of this multiple interventions are greatest if introduced early. So this is before 1% of the population has been infected. So when we look at China and Italy, we can see obviously that they waited too late to do some of these measures, which is why they had to go the drastic way. And that's how you see China quarantining, 60 million people in one city. You're seeing Italy locking down essentially a whole country just to try and slow the spread. However, social distancing doesn't have to be as draconian as we're seeing. It doesn't have to be as cruel, as harsh as we've seen. And we can see a modern version of the St. Louis method being carried out by South Korea. So we see that South Korea has not locked down its citizens. It's not told them to be quarantined. But it has, what they say they've done is they've given an approach where the response system is blending into public voluntary participation and is using creative applications of technology to figure out how we can keep people at a safe social distance, test them more, make sure that the infected people are being catered to.
Absolutely.
So I think there's lessons to learn from 1918. And that social distancing didn't start in 2020. It's a strategy, a public health strategy that has been used previously.
And I think that tale of two cities can really show Kenyans that we can choose either one of them.
We can throw a parade.
We can throw a parade. If you want to throw a parade, by all means, you do it. Or do we want to be St. Louis, which really learned and was able to kind of quell the deaths that happened?
Exactly. So on a day where we had a winning headline from
the Daily Nation,
and no winning cartoons, I have a challenge for you guys, a quarantine challenge as you sit at home or isolate. I have cities, but no houses. I have mountains, but no trees. I have water, but no fish. What am I? So drop your comments in our YouTube comment.
GK, are
you don't want to tell us?
No, I'll tell you the answer tomorrow. Tomorrow we will see who has gotten it right. And don't Google. Google is cheating. Right? So and I want to leave you with this. 100 years ago, people didn't even know that the flu was caused by a virus. Now we know who the enemy is. We know that SARS-CoV-2 virus is the one which is causing COVID-19. And so we're in a much better place than we were 100 years ago. And we're discovering newer, better medicines and treatments. So there is hope, and we will get there. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, but also find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Time Free to Air, and Star Times. Have a good evening.